all our friends who have come and visitors who have come from outside Nyanza, good morning. Hamjambo. Happy New Year. Thank you very much. I'm so delighted to have opportunity to talk to you people in the new year. Bringing to you greetings from outside Kenya, from some of the friends of Kenya whom I've been meeting these last few days. Now we also welcome here to LV Marina. But now we're LV Marina, but this ground where we are here is also known as Kisumu molasses plant. So I think it is perfect in order to explain to you people, because I know that the media is going to be making a lot of speculations about how and why we are doing this. This plant, which is next door here, was put up here at the time of the oil crisis of 1972-73. The government came up with the idea of setting up a plant to manufacture ethanol from sugar production, and that this ethanol will be blended with the fuel, a ratio of about 25%, to reduce the cost of imports of oil, which was being done at that time, because the price of crude had gone up so high. Then the construction then started. The government went into partnership with some other companies. But while that was going on, because then OPEC had been established, and OPEC kept on increasing the prices of crude. But then, all of a sudden, the oil prices began to go down. The crude price began to go down. And the oil companies here were not very much in favor of blending, because they would prefer to import the crude from outside, because they do make their money actually in the high seas before the product land here. So they themselves also sabotage the construction of this plant. So later on, the government decided to auction that plant. That plant was auctioned, and we bought it in an auction. We were the highest bidder at the fall of the hammer. When we bought it, there was issue of land. They said that we were only selling the assets, not the land. Then we said, of what use are those equipment? What use are those buildings on the ground to somebody if you're not selling it with the land? And they said you should negotiate the land separately with the government. And therefore they decided not to transfer to us. We had paid a deposit. So we went to court. After a lengthy process, eventually the court ruled against us, and we kept quiet. Then later on, they did not now find any buyer. They asked for the second lowest was not interested. The third lowest was not interested. So the matter ended there. Later on now, the government decided to invite people again to express interest. We expressed interest. Again, we were the lowest. So we said, now you do this. This time they agreed to also transfer with the land. So we paid for the land separately and for the plant also. That's how we took over. Then we entered into partnership with the South African company. And eventually we managed to complete the construction of the plant and launched it and started manufacturing ethanol from molasses. This plant was put up here in Kisumu because of the reason of the proximity to the sugar plants, manufacturing companies in the region. Moroni, Shemelil, Miwani, Mumias, and Zoya. But then, unfortunately, in the process of of this confusion, when the plant was not being operated, Muhoroni came up also with another ethanol plant. This is called agrochemicals. So now Muhoroni was now not available as a supply of raw material to this plant. Then Mumias, which was the biggest source of supply, also decided to put up their own ethanol plant in Mumias. So we now found ourselves short of raw materials for this plant here. We looked around. Of course, we are getting from Sony, from Chemelil, Miwani had gone dead, from Zoya, but all that was inadequate. And on the other side, there was Butali that was established, and also West Kenya in the west, in the other side. So we now had a problem of raw materials. Sometimes we used to bring molasses from Kagera in Tanzania. That was too far, logistically very difficult. Then we were also bringing molasses from Uganda, from Kakira. That became our only source. We were importing from Kakira. Then Kakira also set up their own ethanol plant. So therefore, we ran out of raw materials. So this plant here was closed because of lack of raw materials to produce ethanol. And then now we decided to think out of the box. So we started to think out of the box, and that's how we came up with this idea of this project. But we also said that plant is there. As you know, the town has now expanded this side. So a manufacturing plant, a chemical manufacturing plant within the town here is no longer quite tenable. So this decision has been made that we relocate that plant. And in the process of the government now reorganizing the sugar industry, we will transfer that plant to one of the sugar mills, either Chemelil or Zoya, so that that plant can also continue to manufacture, or Yala Swamp. That's the reason why we decided that this project here is the most ideal for this region. And I negotiated with my brother, Shabal, and we agreed that we should go ahead with this project. It is a project whose time has come around this area. And we are talking about housing. Hinga has already told you how we talked about this affordable housing issue. I was Minister for Roads, Public Works, and Housing. I am the one who first went and introduced an amendment to the Housing Act, which had been there from 1966, to the time I was made a minister, to come up with a housing policy that was responsive to the needs of the country at that time. Now, this issue of rural-urban migration is a permanent phenomenon. But this matter was never addressed properly by successive regimes from independence. You remember people after independence started to migrate from the rural areas into towns. The government of the day at that time decided to stop people from coming. Mzee said, Rudi mashambani. Even songs were coined. Mzee kasema rudi mashambani, hakuna kazi. People went back to land and found nothing useful to do, eventually came back to town. The colonial government was addressing this issue properly. You see most of these estates in our towns. Even in Kisumu here, you had Shorimoyo, you had Lumumba, you had Makasembo, and so on. That were built at that time. In Nairobi, you have so many of them. In Mombasa. Nothing happened after independence. So people came into towns, and there was no housing. As a result, people started to put up structures, informal structures. And the government now christened them informal settlements. That's how we ended up with Kibra, we ended up with Madare, Mukuru, Wanjenga, and all those, the equivalent here in Kisumu, in Kakamega, in Mombasa, and so on and so forth. So I went to Malaysia and Singapore and saw what they had done to deal with this issue, because rural-urban migration is a permanent phenomenon. People will move from the rural areas to go to urban centers in search of employment. So you need to address it. And the way they are addressing it is a comprehensive policy, where you deal with issue of shelter, issue of employment, issue of education, issue of health, and recreation. So all those units that they were building there in Malaysia had those in itself. You have got houses, but then also you have workshops where people work. And then you have got a market where they put their wares. And then you have schools where people go. Then you have got a health center. And then you have got a social amenities where people go and exercise. So that is the integrated development, urban development, which they did in Malaysia, and also in Korea, and the same thing in Singapore. So this was my idea, that we do this in all our urban centers. We started in Kibra. We did also one unit in Kiambu. We also did in Mombasa. But now this is a responsibility which is in the hands of Mr. Hinga and his people. But I'm happy that they now agree to work together with the private sector, because this is not something that can be left purely to the government. They need an input of the private sector in order to be able to deal with this challenge of shelter in our country. So it serves me to confirm Kisumu's emerging status as a progressive city and county that is preparing for the future. And I really want to thank the governor for the work that is done here in Kisumu. The future belongs to the cities that offer higher standards of life, including better homes, better schools for our children, good hospitals, good social amenities, and good jobs. I believe that the best way to give every resident a stake in a city or an urban center is to give them a good home or house. That way, we create a city where every member has more stake in its security, health, and continued prosperity. This project is a contribution to the realization of that firmly held belief. I must thank the leadership of the county and the management of the city, the deliberate efforts to position Kisumu as the go-to place, not just in Western Kenya, but in the country and in the region. This is confirmed when I was in this week. I was in Harare, I was in Joburg, I was in Windhoek in Namibia, I was in Gaborone in Botswana, I was in Bambani in Lesotho. But all those places there, they know that the cleanest city in town, they will tell you about Kigali, and they will tell you about there's a city in Benin, Cotonou, and then they tell you about Kisumu. Kisumu is always there. The proliferation of slums in our urban centers, Kisumu included, has led to the inability of the county authorities to provide adequate services to their citizens. Many of our cities and towns face problems of securing and distributing sufficient supplies of clean water to the residents, ensuring effective solid waste management and proper sanitation. In addition to challenges in providing necessities like electricity, health centers, schools, and playgrounds, among other basics. So I just want to say that this groundbreaking is just the beginning of what I believe will be a game changer, not just for Kisumu, but for Kenya as a whole. LB Marina will create jobs, attract tourists, and stimulate local businesses. With its close proximity to the airport and its integrated design, we expect this development to position the city and the Western Kenya as a destination of choice for global investors, businesses, and visitors. We hope that visitors will come to Kisumu, and conferences will be held here in Kisumu, and this will help the people of Kisumu. It will help the economy of this region generally, because as you know, Kisumu is equidistant. Kakamega is next door, Busia, just over there, Bungoma, you've got Kericho, you've got Nandi Hills, Kapsabet, you've got Kisii, Nyamira, Homa Bay, Kisumu Dala. So we welcome our friend from Mombasa. I want to tell you a story about Mombasa and Kisumu. You know, they built a railway line from Mombasa all the way to Kisumu. It was called Kenya-Uganda Railway. Now somebody will ask, why was it called a Uganda Railway and it only ended in Kisumu? The reason is because at that time Kisumu was part of Uganda. It was the capital of Eastern Province of Uganda, which went all the way up to Nakuru. And that's what Idi Amin was trying to claim. So now in those days, there was no lifts or cranes. People used to carry goods on the back. When the ships brought goods in Mombasa, they would be lifted and put on the wagons, the train. Then the train will bring them all the way to Kisumu. And when they arrived here, then they will now remove them from the train and put them into the ship to be taken across to Port Bell in Uganda. So people would remove the goods, the bags, and take down to the ship. When they came here, they found people who are much stronger. They said, hawa watu ni stronger than wale Waswahili huko Mombasa. So that's how they started to import labor from here to Mombasa. And so we found the Jaluos and Banyalas working there in Mombasa, and the dock workers. that is the history. Now walipofika kule wanakaa Mombasa, na baadaye wanapata buibui. Sasa kupata buibui, sasa akienda kufanya kazi, anafanya kazi, akirudi namna hii anaingia, oh mwanangu, najua umechoka kabisa, karibu. Sasa kuna maji moto imewekwa pale ya kuosha mguu. Karibu mwanangu kaka. Alafu anafisha mguu, chakula iko tayari. Anakaa. Jamaa anasahau ya kwamba bibi aliwacha hapa nyumbani. Bibi aliwacha nyumbani, anatawaliwa na ndugu yake hapa. Sasa jamaa anakaa, anasahau kabisa alikuwa mmoja bibi na watoto hapa. Anakaa mpaka jamaa anakufa. Sasa jeneza ndio inakuja. Ndio wakasema Mombasa kuingia ni harusi, kutoka ni matanga. Asanteni sana. Welcome.
Well, let's appreciate His Excellency for those great words of wisdom as we be on our feet for the national